You're going to meet people who, when they were backed up against the wall, they learned something about themselves, and they came out on top. They've been to hell and back, but they've taken the scars and they've turned them into lessons, positive lessons. So my first guest has been there. He's been there. His name is Todd Crandell, and today he's a picture of health and vitality, but for 13 years, he lived in a drug-induced private hell that nearly cost him his life. So let's take a look at his story.
When my mother committed suicide, I was 3.5 years old. She was addicted to drugs. Looking back on it now, I think that had a tremendous impact on what was about to happen to me. I had my first sip of beer when I was in 8th grade, and instantly a feeling came over me that I thought, I'm onto something here.
Filled with feelings of inadequacy and loneliness, Todd Crandell learned to medicate himself with alcohol and drugs at an early age.
I remember many instances going to school totally wasted. I would sit during class and snort drugs off of my desk. At that point, drugs and alcohol played such an important role in my life that I couldn't live without them. My lowest point ever was on April 14th of 1993. I had been drinking for 3 or 4 days at the time and taking a lot of other drugs. And the cops came, they arrested me, and that's when I said, enough is enough. I knew that it was going to be an upwards battle, but it was a battle that I was going to win, and I could win.
Todd would eventually triumph over his addiction, honing his restored vitality into a new pastime, competitive sports.
I've done 5 Ironman triathlons, which consist of a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then a 26.2 marathon run. And the high that I get from finish winning those is better than any drug or sip of alcohol I've ever had. I've achieved so much, and I've been blessed with a lot of things in my life, my wife, my children. And even though I may have a bad day and think about going back to some of my old ways, I'm not going to jeopardize what I've achieved so far.
How long you been clean? How long?
Just shy of 9 years.
Well, that deserves it. You know, I'm always so grateful that God is a God of a second chance. Even if it's for the 999th time, you can have a second chance. But who was there for you? You were a kid. You were a child. I heard you say your mom committed suicide. So who else was there for you?
Well, my mom committed suicide, but my dad remarried a couple of years after that. So I grew up in a middle-class family. I had parents. I had a stepbrother, or a half-brother. So I had the basic normal childhood upbringing. I just had the feelings of not really having a sense of belonging. I always felt on the outside, and I was looking for something to fill that void that, after years of figuring this out, I think that my mother's death had caused.
Yeah. So in there you said the turning point was when you got arrested. What were they arresting you for?
I got arrested for my 3rd driving under the influence charge.
Wow.
I had been drinking for 3 or 4 days, doing a lot of drugs at the time, and I was arrested, and I decided after I got out of jail that was it. I had had enough. I think it took all those years of hitting rock bottom, so to speak, that they finally culminated into me saying, you know, I can't take this anymore.
Well, I always say when you hit rock bottom, that's good because God made the rock.
Absolutely.
And it just kind of wakes you up a little bit. So they arrested you. Did you serve any time?
I knew I had to do some jail time when I was arrested, and I was fine with that because I knew in my heart that I was done drinking. This was going to be an experience that was going to help me grow through my recovery, and it did. I'll never forget being in jail, incarcerated, and not being able to get out. And I knew I was never going back. So to me, I just turned it into a positive.
How did you know? Tell me, what was it? Was it an inner feeling? Was it a sense?
I remember sitting there very intoxicated, and it was like a light switch came on, and I just had an overwhelming sense of, like it was like fresh air.
Any moment can be the moment. The light will just come on.
It came on, and I said, I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I knew in my heart that I was done with that lifestyle. And I had tried for years to stop.
Right.
And I knew this time that was it.
When it's time, it's time. How did you get from drugs and drinking and jail to triathlons? I mean, hui. I'm just trying to get from no carbs to protein. and you went from drugs and drinking to the triathlon? Oh, talk to me.
Well, there were two major influences in this. One, I used to watch the Ironman Hawaii on TV with, you know, a pile of cocaine in front of me and a bottle of whiskey. And I used to think, you know,
I'm being inspired. No.
I used to
Really?
sit and I'd think, I want to do that someday. I think it's neat. And my stepmother used to run triathlons and marathons when I was growing up, and I always admired her for that. So those two factors, once I became sober for a few years and achieved some of the things I wanted to, I said, well, I need to pursue another goal. And I chose the Ironman triathlon.
Incredible. And do you ever feel guilty?
I'm not proud of a lot of the things I did back in those 13 years, but I've learned from them, and I'm taking those bad things and just trying to turn it into a positive situation.
Is that what Racing for Recovery is?
Absolutely.
Okay, talk to me about that.
Racing for Recovery is a nonprofit organization that I started just to share my story.
Tell your story.
Just tell my story, and hopefully people will learn from it.
Yeah.
I want to prevent kids from getting involved in drugs and alcohol, but I also want to show people that may be currently battling their addictions that, hey, there's a better life. You can get out of that current situation you're into. However bad it is, you may think that you're lost, that you can't come out of it. You can. Number two, and I think more importantly, you have to want it yourself.
Want it for yourself. That's it.
I tried for years to stop drinking to save a relationship or avoid going to jail, and I always failed. But when I wanted to do it for myself, that's when it clicked.
That's when the light came on.
That's when the light came on, and it's been a positive experience ever since.
Any moment can be the moment. Thank you, Todd. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Next, you'll